Welcome to a new edition of the Neon Jazz interview series with jazz guitarist and composer Jonathan Kreisberg. He spoke about his latest 2019 CD. It's a live one, his very first one, called Capturing Spirits, combining melodicism with forward-thinking textures. This cat was born in New York City and started playing guitar at the age of 10 after moving to Miami with his family. He won a scholarship to the University of Miami, and he learned from the likes of Joe Henderson, Michael Brecker, and the great Red Rodney. In his 20s, he returned to New York City with a focus on cutting-edge acoustic jazz. Since that time, he has had 8+ albums, and he's gigged with the likes of Dr. Lonnie Smith, Lee Konitz, Joe Locke, Donald Edwards, and so many others. Please get to know him and dig this interview, my friends.
Jonathan, thanks for taking a minute out for Neon Jazz today. I appreciate it.
Sure, great to be here.
So let's go ahead and talk about Capturing Spirits. It's a great album. Love the artwork. The entire packaging of this is a wonderful album. So from your words, talk to me a little bit about what your vision for this project was.
So this album is an interesting one, not just because it's my first live record, but because it was unintentionally executed. In other words, we were on the road in the middle of kind of a whirlwind European tour, and the shows were going great, but it was kind of crazy travel, every day a new city, the way it has to be these days, it seems. In the back of my mind, I was thinking, wow, these tunes and this new lineup is really sounding good. I got to book a date in the studio and go in and find a way to, thinking about how am I going to do these tunes? What order am I going to put them in? All that starting the way you would leading up to a studio album. You start thinking. We had one day that we just kind of were running, and the drummer lost his wallet in the cab, and it was, we went straight to the stage, a quick sound check, and we hit. And after I just said, wow, you know what? That was actually a really good gig, because sometimes when you're in those moments, you aren't afforded the time to really think too much. You just have to be in the moment, Of course, not thinking about recording or anything like that, just enjoying the music. And I said at the end, I said, well, we kind of would have recorded that. And the cat from the club looked at me and he was like, oh, you don't remember? We did. So it was within seconds. I just, in my mind, whether it was that, I wasn't sure at that point whether it was that record, with that concert, you know what I mean? But I was somehow just suddenly, it hit me because I haven't really done a live album, and it just hit me that this one is meant to be a live album, Just, it was something about the tunes and everything. I don't know why I hadn't thought about it till that point. And I said, you know what, I want to hear these, because I think this, I figured it would be like maybe part of a live album, that I could call from a few different performances. But actually, in the end, we just used that gig because it was just something nice about having one show. A lot of guys, they'll record 5 nights, or they'll do a bunch of different gigs and put them together and take their favorites. But instead of doing that, I just said I'd rather keep it, capturing the spirit of that night, and that's kind of what it was, and how the title and the artwork and everything is all connected to that idea about, the experience of jazz, which is something that's unique,
Without a doubt. And my next question to you was going to be, you go into a studio to record an album with a gut instinct, and I was wondering what it was like for this, but you had no idea. So that had to just make this entire visceral experience that much more special.
Yeah, that's definitely the idea, because it's honest and it's true. It's what really happens. That was, even once you start setting up mics and you start being conscious of recording a gig, whether it's live or in the studio, you've already changed something. It's like the tree falling in the forest. So that's kind of what I like about this. And I'd love to do all my albums like this, to be honest, but it's pretty hard to be recorded without knowing it, And like I said, this I think had been in the contract, but I had signed that probably 5 months before the gig. I totally forgot about it. So, and the way he recorded, it was just he was using the mics we used for the live sound. So it didn't really even cross my mind, And I wish I could do every gig that way. Like, if any promoters are listening to this, please record me and don't tell me.
Right on. So everything began for you in New York City. You started on the guitar very young. Talk to me, and you even mentioned in your bio that you grew up in a very musical, rich house. Talk to me a little bit about your childhood and how jazz became your path.
I did grow up in a musically rich household, appreciation-wise, you know. My father loved good music and had great taste and very wide-ranging taste. That being said, I did not grow up in a house of musicians like some people do, you know, and I didn't have the piano sitting around, you know, so I grew up hearing great music. But my father and my mother's an artist, and my father, you know, had done some acting when he was younger and became an attorney later. So they were artistic people, but not like, I wasn't from a musical family. I mean, I had a grandfather that played the trumpet, another one that had a big band. So, you know, going back there was some, you know. But I think, you know, the personalities of my folks were pretty musical in a way, if that makes sense. So that being said, you know, I was hearing Coltrane, I was hearing Cream, I was hearing The Who, I was hearing some classical guitar, some like, you know, interesting soundtracks like Zorba the Greek and like, you know, some Sondheim and stuff like that, and all kinds of really weird, wide-ranging tastes. I mean, Ray Charles and Betty Carter, the duo album, you know, Take 5, the Babe Brubeck record. So, you know, I was hearing that stuff, and I think, you know, some of them had a stronger impression on me than others. Like, I think even pretty young, I could feel something different from something like Coltrane's My Favorite Things, which my dad had. And I remember that one having that and some Who records that had some really strong impact on me. And there's still something to those albums that I say hit me in a certain way, you know, and I can't really describe it. Like there's something about the feeling of music, right? That it's very hard. You can describe styles, but it's hard to describe the feelings of music. But like, for instance, like, I know this will sound really weird, but like, to me, there's almost more similarities between Coltrane playing My Favorite Things and Tommy from The Who than there is between, say, you know, Coltrane playing My Favorite Things and Ray Charles and Betty Carter record. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I don't know what those things are, but there's certain feelings in music that I felt pretty young. And I got that same feeling again when I was probably about 9 or 10, and I heard Eddie Van Halen playing Eruption, you know? Mm-hmm. And I just, wow, like that instrument, whatever that sound is, that's what I want to play, you know? So I got a guitar. And it was, you know, it was years before I put together the fact that basically I was hearing Eddie channeling Alan Holdsworth, who was channeling Coltrane. So it was all connected, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But, you know, so I started playing guitar like most kids at that age, studying classical because I was being taught that by the teacher, but then also I was learning rock, you know. But pretty quickly, you know, I'd say about 4 or 5 years later, I realized, oh, wow, like I can play all this great music that I was hearing on pianos and saxophones, you know, the jazz music on the guitar. I kind of didn't put it together at first. I wasn't like some of these guitar players who start on jazz guitar, like they start out checking out Wes, you know, like that wasn't really my background. And I kind of think that's cool because it's somehow how it helped me to develop my own sound. You know, instead of trying to mimic another jazz guitar player, I was kind of taking these wide-ranging influences and applying it to the guitar, which I loved the sound of many different styles of guitar. But most of my jazz influences were probably mostly pianists and saxophonists, you know.
I kind of wanted to go along the lineage of your life, and you moved to Miami. You ended up getting a scholarship to the University of Miami. And what did you learn going to the University of Miami and having the chance to be around pretty heavy hitters?
I'm very grateful for all the opportunities I had when I was at the University of Miami. They're really, you know, especially Randall Dallahan, the head of the guitar department, really kind of took me under his wing and gave me a lot of opportunities. And that was great. You know, the only thing I'll say that I've seen in my life is that any education is just what the student makes of it, you know. I think that you can really have some amazing opportunities in the university like that. with connections and things like that. But at the same time, I've seen guys that just, learn from the street, and they just took advantage of all the opportunities they were given to learn, and those guys can sound amazing too. So I think that it's a great tool, but I think that these days sometimes people get a little obsessed with the scholastic side of jazz, Yeah, I had a great opportunities there, and it was great for me. Yeah.
So did you always know you wanted to be a musician? Was that always your first choice?
I knew it pretty young. I used to, when everyone has little things that they toy about probably when they're kids. I loved playing soccer. I was a good soccer player. I loved marine biology. I was really interested in that, and I was in the water a lot. I grew up in Miami. By the time I hit, let's say about 13, 14, I was already kind of pretty much on a path, I had some bad friends that were getting in trouble, and I think I almost kind of said, yeah, maybe I should not hang with those guys and let me just go work on my music, and I think it was pretty smart.
So my question is this too: what brought you back to New York City? Was that always something you wanted to do?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, being born in New York, having my father growing up in New York, and just his whole vibe and sense of humor was really like, I didn't know it at the time, but I grew up. It's probably part of, everyone, we always have these recipes to who we become. And I think even though that was a little difficult for me because Miami's got a really different vibe and speed from New York, So I think that was maybe one of the things that possibly made me feel a little bit like an outsider, but not necessarily in a bad way. I just really was like able to do my own thing and be really focused. And I think part of that came from the fact that I just felt like a displaced New Yorker for most of my childhood, And then I think when I was on tour with a group that I had put together that I had in Miami. We had a lot of great little tours up and down the East Coast, and every once in a while we would play in New York. And every time I played in New York, I would just hear these great players, and I'd sense what was going on there scene-wise, and I just said, wow, I got to move up. I got to move up there. So, as soon as I did, it was just one of those, oh, yeah, this is correct, I'm not even basing that on the music, because the music scene is obviously, that's where it's at, New York, It was just also the vibe of the feeling, and the people.
So you've been at this for a while, 8+ CDs, and you've been in a lot of different incarnations and been around the world. What do you think your voice is, your unique sound? How would you characterize the voice that you have accumulated and evolved into up to this point?
I mean, that's always a hard question for me. I mean, basically, I feel like you'd probably have a better stab at that than I would. I mean,
yeah.
I'd say, what do you think it is that you hear,
I think I hear something that's very unique. Somebody that my feeling from you is that you have definitely wanted to create a sound that's absolutely unique, that is something that not many people, not only in jazz but in music, are doing, and you're capturing it very well.
Well, first of all, thank you so very much, because it's, whether it's ingrained or whether it's a conscious thing that's developed over time, that's definitely something I feel very central. And it's also something when I'm listening to music that really either gets me or repels me. When I hear sometimes a really great player who just somehow, it sounds like, sometimes when I can hear someone who's technically or even intellectually on a very high level, but it sounds like emotionally they're adopting someone else's demeanor or intent, it really bugs me. I don't know what it is, but not everybody feels that, because there's people in New York and in the jazz world that are receiving a lot of acclaim, even currently, that when I hear them, I just say, wow, that's really adopting this person's thing.
Yeah, I dig it.
And they may look a little different or be a different gender or kind of fit in a different light, but sometimes I hear it and I say, wow, That's weird, you know.
Yeah.
I mean, we all have influences, but I just think it's important to take the influences and then try and understand why those players do what they do. You know, of course, we're going to, as jazz musicians, we adopt phrases and we speak in lingo that we've heard from our masters. You know, that's beautiful, you know. But the important thing, I think, is to avoid the emotional intent being copied. You know what I mean? That's what you can't copy, you know? You just can't. I mean, you can try, but there's going to be, for some reason, your music is never going to touch people if you do that, you know? And that's what I hear, you know, whether there's some very influential forces, you know, in the music world, and those are the ones you really should watch out for, because a lot of the things that make them great is the emotional intent behind their music, right? And that yours can't be the same as them. It's impossible. You know, we all feel different, you know? So I know that sounds kind of heady, but it's actually something that I you know, maybe even recently started to realize what it was, you know? How you can have two players play the same line and they can sound totally different, or you can hear two players play different lines and something bugs you, like that one guy is kind of copying the other guy's vibe. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I think that it's the emotional intent behind the music. That's important, to find your own path on that, you know, even more than a craft of constructing lines and things like that. You know, although, you know, of course, mimicry is something to watch out for too, outright, you know. But it's interesting. So, I mean, I just think I always felt that subliminally, and not always successful. You know, I've felt just like anybody, to somehow, you know, sometimes compose something or play something, and I listen back and I say, ooh, that's a lot like this person. You know what I mean? Something like that, you know? And I'm very conscious of it, and I tend to find ways to get away from it when it happens, you know? So, yeah, it's an interesting subject, and I'll say that, you know, you do read some of the older cats saying, like, you know, man, when I was a kid, like, you did that. If you came to a session and you started playing like this guy, like note for note and like going for his vibe, people would throw stuff at you, you know, like they really took it serious, you know. And I don't sense that so much right now, you know, and especially with all the incredible technology there is now for learning. You know, you can put on a video of a guy, slow it down to half speed and look at exactly what the hands are doing, listen to the notes, you know. And I think that, you know, that's definitely a blessing to a small percentage compared to the curse part. The curse part is a lot stronger than the blessing in this case, I think, you know, and it's got to be dealt with very carefully. Like, you know, I think that that spoon-feeding information, it not only deflates the mystery of music, but it also, you know, it makes it too easy to learn. You know, if there's no struggle, how do you develop your own thing? You know, that's what Vinnie Colaiuta called a heightened level of mediocrity is what we're experiencing right now.
Yeah. Yep. I dig it.
Yeah.
So what do you like best about being a musician?
Oh, man. I mean, you know, not everything, you know, not the traveling and not all the financial struggles and all the things, of course. You know, those are the obvious difficulties of being especially an improvising musician. But I'll say that, you know, that moment you get on stage and you're playing in front of a new crowd in a new place, and you hit those notes, you know, and then you get to that zone where you just connect. That's what it's about. I mean, in a way, it's an addiction, you know. It's an amazing feeling. I can say I'm maybe lucky in that way that's I have a lot of things that I have to work on in my playing and in my music. But there's one thing that I've kind of, you know, always been pretty good at, which is to be able to kind of just be in the moment and close my eyes and get to a place, you know. And I think that's what we live for, is improvising and composing and improvising musicians. You know, it's a thing, you know, and it's something. That moment when it happens, you just feel connected to everything. You know, the people that are listening, to the cosmos, and that's what it's about. And that's something really unique to what we do, I think. You know, I'm sure that it happens in many different kinds of music, but there's something about when you're really lost in improvisation that I think is what I live for, and it's that idea that you're using all this language that you've learned and trying to create something new, that's the moment,
So what was one of the first live jazz shows you ever saw that really, really got you going?
Oh man, that's tough. That's really tough. I was trying to think of that one day. It was hard. It was hard for me to remember because, some of my first concert experiences were not jazz, I heard jazz growing up on records, but when I was a kid, my dad took me to see the Police Synchronicity, and that was pretty incredible. That was an arena show, but the music was really great, and the groove was great, and Stuart Copeland, just amazing drummer. So, that's, that influence is there for the energy of the music. But, I can remember certain very influential shows, and those all took place probably in my late teens. One was Metheny Letter from Home tour with that band, which was unbelievable, Still, I love all his projects, but that's still probably my favorite. That lineup with Pedro Aznar, incredible. So there was that. I used to see Alan Holdsworth at a place called the Musicians Exchange in Fort Lauderdale. I used to go up and see him 2 shows Friday, 2 shows Saturday. I couldn't get enough. I think I'm trying to remember. I saw Branford's Quartet down at doing a show in Miami that left a pretty strong impression. That was probably when I was in high school. What else did I see at that point? Those are all some pretty early shows. I saw Schofield on the beach. I was a little older when I saw that, but that was great too. Those are some of the strongest impressions I can remember.
So why do you love jazz?
For me, there's something. It's very hard to say what it is that is so unique about jazz. I used to say, it was the improvisation, but of course there's other kinds of music with improvisation, or the groove, but there's other music with semi-similar grooves. So I just think it's some type of combination of those things. It's a certain juxtaposition of the time feel, the improvisation, the sophistication of the compositions. But, at the same time, it's kind of what I mean. Remember what I said in the beginning about hearing something like The Who and hearing Coltrane, and then both having some central thing that was touching me, to give you another example, like the first time I heard Nefertiti, Miles's record, which is a lot of Wayne's writing and Herbie's writing, of course, especially Wayne, When I heard that, something like really strongly triggered, and I think that's exactly what I'm talking about. Is there's something, I love Oscar Peterson and I love Wes, but that's a different feeling, It's a different feeling than something like Nefertiti, which may almost be more similar to Synchronicity by the Police, you know what I mean? And I can't describe what I mean, but for me, it hits me. It's a feeling of wonder, a feeling of mystery, a feeling of possibilities, That's, for me personally, what draws me to the kind of jazz that I'm playing. You know what I mean? That's the only way I can say it, because for jazz means many things for many different people, and that's also what I like about it, So for someone who's, I love, like I said, Wes, Oscar Peterson, a lot of just swinging great jazz, the feeling of my music is pretty clearly different, I think as much as I draw from those guys, the emotional content of what I do is what I call jazz. And it's going to be different than what someone else calls jazz, And I think that's what I like about it.
So everything's going to come down to this. Everyone has their perception of you, your family, your friends, your fans, but you know yourself best. You're living your own life. Who do you think you are?
I'd rather if you said it like kind of angry,
Who do you think you are? Yeah.
Who do you think you are?
That's right.
I try not to think. I try just to be, especially for jazz musicians. It's good to think in the shed, but when you're doing it, it's good to just be, I don't think it matters who I think I am. I think I just have to just try and continue being the best version of myself as I can be. You know, that's all we can do is try and improve, you know, musically and personally every day. You know, there's a great Bob Dylan quote that I love. It says, "He who is not busy being born is busy dying." I just thought that was perfect.
That is a great quote. Jonathan, thank you for taking some time out today to talk about your great new live album and your life in music. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, I appreciate you playing the music, and hope that your listeners come out to a show and check out some more.
Thanks for listening and tuning in to another Neon Jazz interview, where we give you a bit of insight into the finest players in New York, Miami, Kansas City, and spots all over the globe, giving fans all that jazz. And thanks to Jonathan for his time, music, and stories. If you want to hear more interviews, go to Famous Interviews with Joe Domino on the iTunes Store. Visit Neon Jazz at youtube.com. And for everything Neon Jazz all the time, go to the neonjazz.blogspot.com. Until next time, enjoy the jazz, my friends.
Neon Jazz.